The Gear and the Gun, Chapter 1. The Broken Gear, Lina. The night pressed against the glass of her workshop, heavy with rain and city smoke. Inside, the air hummed with a softer rhythm. The low buzz of machines, the quiet clink of her tools. Lina Rivera worked like the world outside didn't exist. Her fingers moved in clean, precise motions, tracing the edge of a brass gear so delicate it caught the light like jewelry. Someone had dropped it off earlier that morning. No name, no details, just a paper tag with the words, "Fix this." Strange job, but money was money. Lina wiped the metal clean. Whoever designed this knew balance and power, the kind of precision found in military tech, not household machines. Probably from one of those underground collectors, she murmured to herself. By the time she finished, it was past midnight. She stretched, reached for her tea, and froze when the bell above her shop door chimed. No one came this late. Her hand slipped toward the wrench lying on the counter. Not much of a weapon, but it felt heavy and sure in her palm. "Sorry," she called, keeping her voice firm. "We're closed." The door opened wider. 3 men stepped inside. They didn't belong to this part of the city. Too clean, too sharp, too silent. Suits tailored to perfection, eyes scanning every shadow. The man in the center walked forward, unhurried, removing his gloves with calm precision. His presence pulled at the air like gravity itself. "Lina Rivera," he said, his voice low, smooth, dangerous. "You fixed something that wasn't meant to be touched." Matteo. He didn't need to ask if she was the one. He knew. The moment Matteo DeLuca saw the girl behind the counter, sleeves rolled to her elbows and oil smudged on her wrist, he felt the odd flicker of recognition. Not from memory, from instinct. The kind of instinct that told him when someone didn't belong in his world. She was ordinary, too calm, too alive. The shop smelled like metal and tea, not blood and power like he was used to. He stepped closer. "Where did you get that?" The girl didn't flinch. "Customer drop-off." Her voice was steady. That annoyed him more than fear would have. "You opened it?" "I fix things. That's what I do." There was no fear in her tone, only irritation. He found that intriguing. He picked up the gear, turning it between his fingers. The weight was right, the etching clean. No damage. Whoever she was, she had skill. He set it down gently. "You'll come with me." She blinked. "Excuse me?" The wrench in her hand tightened. "You're not serious." "I never joke about my work." He motioned to his men. They stepped forward, silent as shadows. Lina's heart raced, but her voice didn't waver. "What are you, some kind of Mafia cliché?" Matteo's expression didn't change. He simply said, "No, Bella. I'm the reason those clichés exist." And then blackness took over. Lina's eyes opened to soft light and a ceiling too high, too white. She pushed herself up fast. She was lying on a couch in a room that looked like it had been carved out of money. Black marble floors, glass walls, and not a speck of dust anywhere. Her heart slammed once, hard. She remembered the suits, the man in black, the gun. Then the door opened. He walked in like he owned the air, which she suspected he did. Matteo DeLuca, perfectly pressed shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms, watch glinting like a silent threat. "Good," he said when he saw her awake. "You're not dead." Her jaw clenched. "You kidnapped me." He tilted his head slightly, considering her choice of words. "I relocated you. Temporarily. Is that what you tell all your hostages?" You have something that belongs to me. The gear you repaired is part of a system that was sabotaged. You didn't know that, but now you do. Which means you're involved. I'm not part of your business, she said flatly. Unfortunately, the moment you touched that piece, you became part of it. He slid a file across the desk, blueprints, photos, and a security diagram of what looked like an underground vault. Her name was written on one corner in red ink. Her stomach turned. You had me investigated? I don't like loose gears in my machine, he said calmly. They break things. She crossed her arms. So what's your plan? Keep me locked here until you decide whether to shoot me or not? Matteo's lips curved faintly, humorless. If I wanted to kill you, Miss Rivera, I would have done it last night. So you want me to work for you? Until I find out who tried to use you, yes. He turned back, eyes unreadable. I'm offering you protection. You'll stay alive. You'll have everything you need to work. And when this is done, you walk away. What happens if I say no? Matteo didn't blink. Then I let you go. Her chest loosened, for a second. He added quietly, but I can't promise someone else won't find you. She didn't answer right away. He could see the calculation in her eyes, not fear, but analysis. She was trying to measure him. He admired that. Most people trembled in front of him. She looked like she wanted to throw a wrench at his head. He leaned against the desk, watching her. Think of it this way, he said. You fix things. Something in my system is broken. You help me repair it. After that, I erase your name from everything. Her brow furrowed. And if I do it wrong? Then we'll both have problems. She exhaled slowly. Fine, I'll do it, but on one condition. He raised a brow. You're negotiating with me? Yes. She crossed her arms. No guns in my workspace. I can't think with a barrel in my face. For the first time that night, Matteo actually smiled. Small, dangerous, amused. That's not how my world works, little girl. Then learn a new system, she shot back. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. You start tomorrow. As he left the office, he caught himself thinking of the faint streak of oil across her cheek, the stubborn line of her jaw. He didn't like variables, and she was the most unpredictable variable he'd seen in years. Chapter 2. The First Spark. Lina. The DeLuca headquarters didn't look like the kind of place that hid criminal operations. It was too clean, too silent, too perfectly efficient. Lina didn't need a gun to know she was surrounded by danger. The silence said it all. Matteo led her into a workspace that looked like a laboratory. Tables lined with surveillance modules, dismantled drones, security systems, half-built weapons disguised as technology. It was brilliant, terrifying, and entirely his. This is where you'll work, he said, voice even. She ran her hand across one of the devices. These aren't prototypes. They're active systems. He didn't confirm or deny it. I don't waste time with prototypes. Lina turned to him. You really don't see the line between legal and illegal, do you? He met her gaze without hesitation. Lines are for people who can afford them. The answer made her pulse jump. Part irritation, part fascination. He gestured to the broken schematics on the screen. That's what you're here for. Fix that lock module. My men rely on it. Hours passed. She worked while he stood nearby, occasionally pacing, occasionally watching. Every movement of his was deliberate. No wasted energy, no random gestures. He was the living embodiment of control. It was unsettling. At one point he came closer, placing a hand beside her on the table. You're shaking. I'm thinking, she said, not looking up. Most people don't think that hard under pressure. I'm not most people. For a heartbeat, silence filled the space between them. Not hostile, not soft either, just charged. Lina could feel his gaze on her face, heavy and assessing, as though he was trying to decipher the code behind her calm. She met his eyes. You think people are replaceable. Machines aren't. At least machines can be fixed. Something flickered in his eyes, almost surprise. Then it vanished. You're wrong, he said quietly. Everything can be replaced. Even people. Even machines. She turned back to the screen, her voice low. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. Matteo. He wasn't sure when the sound of tools and her steady breathing had started to feel grounding. Normally, silence was his comfort, but tonight, it was her focus that filled the room, a rhythm he didn't understand but didn't want to interrupt. She was efficient, methodical, like she was part of the machinery she built. Yet there was warmth behind every motion, care, patience, precision. He'd never met anyone who handled metal like that. When she finally leaned back from the workbench, the module lit up green. It's fixed, she said simply. He walked closer, inspecting the system. It worked perfectly, even better than before. You improved it, he said. It was designed wrong, she replied. Whoever built it was trying too hard to make it clever. Clever keeps people alive, he said. She looked up at him. No, reliable does. Matteo studied her, a strange heat tightening in his chest. Logic, defiance, conviction. She had all three, and they clashed perfectly with his chaos. He almost smiled. Almost. You're a problem, Miss Rivera, he murmured. And you're a bad habit, Mr. DeLuca, she shot back. That earned her the faintest curve of his lips, a hint of something dangerous and amused. When she turned back to her work, Matteo stayed there a little longer than he needed to, watching the woman who spoke to him like no one ever dared. He didn't like disruptions in his order. But for the first time in years, he wasn't sure he wanted this one to stop. Lina. The next 3 days blurred into one long cycle of code, circuits, and uneasy silence. Matteo's office became her cage and her sanctuary at the same time. She worked under the constant watch of armed men, yet no one bothered her. Not even him. At least, not until he needed something fixed. He was everywhere and nowhere at once, commanding with a quiet word, answering phone calls in another language, his voice calm even when the air around him seemed ready to explode. Lina had stopped asking questions. In his world, curiosity was a loaded gun. That night, she stayed later than usual. A small system she'd been debugging refused to cooperate, and stubbornness kept her there long after most of his men had left. She was halfway through a coffee that had gone cold when the lights flickered. Then the hum of the building's main grid stuttered, once, twice, and died. Silence. Her head snapped up. The entire lab had gone dark, except for the faint red glow of the emergency lights. Power cut? She murmured, reaching for her phone. The door slammed open before she could move. Matteo stepped inside, gun drawn, eyes sharp and unblinking. Away from the window. Her stomach dropped. What's happening? He didn't answer, just pulled her down behind one of the metal tables. Stay quiet. A second later, glass shattered across the room. The sharp pop of gunfire echoed through the walls, muffled but unmistakable. Her hands trembled, not from panic, but from the cold realization that this was the world she'd stepped into. She pressed her back to the table, voice low. You said I was safe here. I said you'd be alive, he corrected. There's a difference. Bullets struck the far wall, fast, precise, trained. Someone out there knew exactly where to aim. "Who are they?" she whispered. "People who don't like me having nice things," he muttered. Her heart pounded in her throat. "I'm not one of your things." His gaze flicked toward her, even in the half-light. Unreadable. "You are while they're shooting." He moved like a shadow, one hand steadying her, the other returning fire through the broken window. The calm in him was terrifying. No hesitation, no emotion. He was built for this. Lina covered her ears as another blast tore through the glass. Then silence. A minute passed, maybe less, before he exhaled once and lowered his weapon. "They're gone," he said quietly. "Just like that?" "For now." He stood, eyes scanning the shattered room. "They were aiming at you." The words hit harder than the gunfire. "What?" "The gear you fixed," he said. "It was a signal key. Whoever sent it knew it would end up here. With me. They're trying to get to me through you." Lina swallowed hard. "So this is my fault?" Matteo holstered his weapon. "No, it's mine. I should have seen it coming." For a brief second, she saw something almost human in his expression. Not guilt exactly, but recognition. He offered his hand. "We're leaving." "I'm not—" "You don't have a choice," he said softly. "You're in this now." Her fingers hesitated before she took his hand. His grip was steady, grounding, unshakable. And for the first time, she didn't know whether to feel safer or more trapped. Matteo. By the time his men secured the building, he'd already moved her to the car. She sat beside him, silent, staring out the window at the rain-streaked streets. Her reflection in the glass was pale but unbroken. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shaking. That unnerved him more than anything else. He looked at her then, really looked. The streak of blood on her sleeve from the glass, the stubborn lift of her chin. She wasn't like the others. She didn't worship his power. She didn't fear it. She simply endured it. That kind of strength was dangerous. His driver asked, "Boss, safe house or villa?" "Villa," Matteo said. He caught Lina's sideways glance. "Why? Planning another abduction?" He smiled faintly. "Think of it as relocation. Again." "Do I get a say in any of this?" He turned his gaze back to the city lights blurring past. "You had one the night you fixed the wrong gear." She didn't reply. The silence stretched between them, thick, electric, inevitable. For a man who built his world on precision, Matteo felt something shift tonight. Something he couldn't measure or control. He didn't like it, but he didn't want it to stop. Chapter 3. The Machine and the Monster. Lina. The villa sat on the edge of the city, soft and unreachable. The air inside was sterile, almost clinical. Security cameras in every corner, thick curtains, doors that clicked twice when locked. Every sound echoed. This wasn't a home. It was a fortress. Matteo had barely spoken since they arrived. He gave her a room, told her to rest, then vanished behind a heavy oak door with his men. She stood by the window, tracing the faint cut on her arm from the glass. It stung, but it grounded her. Pain was simple, easy to understand. Her phone had been confiscated, her tools locked in a drawer. The only thing left untouched was the small brass gear, now whole again, gleaming in her palm. She turned it between her fingers. "Your trouble," she whispered to it. "You brought me here." The door behind her creaked open. Matteo entered without a sound. His jacket was gone, sleeves rolled, tie loosened. There was blood on his knuckles. Not much, but enough. He didn't explain it, and she didn't ask. "You should eat," he said simply, setting a tray down on the table. She gave a short, humorless laugh. You always bring dinner with blood on your hands? He met her gaze evenly. Only when I'm cleaning up after people who try to kill me. Or me. Especially you. Lina exhaled sharply, setting the gear down. You think I planned that? That I wanted to be dragged into your... whatever this is? No, he said. But you're in it now. He hesitated, just long enough for her to see that there was something unspoken behind the word. Then he looked away. Eat, Lina. For a while they stood in silence. She sat at the table, pushing food around the plate. He leaned against the wall, watching her like a man guarding something he couldn't name. Finally, she said, You keep everything running like a machine. No noise, no mistakes. But the thing about machines, she glanced up, meeting his eyes, is that when they break, they don't bleed. You do. He almost smiled. You think I'm bleeding? I think you used to be human. Something flickered across his expression. Brief, fragile, gone in a heartbeat. Matteo. He walked down to his study, poured himself a drink, and watched the reflection in the glass, his own face, sharp and unreadable. The blood on his hand had already dried, dark against his skin. One of his men entered quietly. The attackers, all dead. We found their signal line. It leads back to Marchese. Matteo nodded. Handle it. When the door shut again, he turned back to the window. The city lights pulsed below, endless, cold, mechanical. For years he'd kept his empire running like clockwork. But now there was a single flaw in the system, one he couldn't erase, or fix, or kill. Her name was Lina Rivera. The morning arrived quietly, but quiet in Matteo's world never meant peace. The villa looked calm, sun pressing through the curtains, men in suits stationed near the gates. But the air carried a kind of tension you could almost taste. Lina sat at the long table, the brass gear in pieces before her, surrounded by Matteo's notes and blueprints. The system he'd mentioned wasn't mechanical at all. It was digital, encrypted, lethal. She traced the lines on one schematic, whispering to herself, This isn't a signal. It's a targeting grid. Correct, came Matteo's voice from the doorway. She looked up. He'd changed. Clean suit, perfect posture, but his eyes were still tired, shadowed. You built this? She asked. I funded it, he said. I needed someone who could finish it without asking questions. She pushed the papers away. I don't build machines that kill people. Before he could answer, one of his guards burst through the door. Boss, perimeter breach. They found us. Matteo's jaw locked. Positions. He turned to Lina. Stay down. Not this again. Now! The first explosion shattered the far wall before she could move. Dust rained from the ceiling. Alarms blared. Matteo pulled her down behind the table, shielding her as bullets tore through the air. The guards returned fire from the hall, the sharp rhythm of violence filling every second. Lina's pulse raced. She could feel Matteo's heartbeat against her back, steady even in chaos. He moved with terrifying precision, each motion calculated. They moved fast, down a narrow hallway, through a service door that led to the garage. His men covered them from behind, but the sound of engines outside meant one thing. Marchese's men had come in force. Matteo opened the car door, but Lina hesitated. This doesn't stop, does it? He met her eyes. Not until one of us is dead. Matteo. The tires screamed against the asphalt as they tore down the mountain road. His driver was gone, dead back at the villa. So it was just him and Lina, smoke still rising in the rearview mirror. Lina clutched the tablet she'd grabbed on her way out, scrolling through the system logs. I can shut their locator feed if I reroute your signal through a dummy circuit. He blinked at her. You can do that? I told you, machines don't lie. The countdown ended with a soft chime. "Done," she gasped. "We're invisible for now." Their eyes met for a heartbeat, his full of something unreadable, hers blazing with defiance and fear all tangled together. Then he looked away. "There's a safe site across the bridge. We'll regroup there." "Matteo?" she said softly. He glanced at her. "If we survive this, will you let me go?" He didn't answer right away. The road curved ahead, empty and shining under the gray light. Finally, he said, "No." She stared at him, shocked. "Why not?" He didn't answer right away. The road curved ahead, empty and shining under the gray light. Finally, he said, his voice low and deliberate, "I don't want to. When something, or someone, is mine, it will remain mine." Lina's breath caught. There was no softness in the words, no mercy, just the kind of truth that came from a man who had spent his life taking and never letting go. Chapter 4. Ash and Steel. Lina. They reached the warehouse before dawn. The place looked abandoned from the outside, rusted doors, cracked concrete, but inside, it was an armory. Rows of crates, steel tables, screens showing camera feeds from half the city. Matteo gave an order in Italian, quiet but final, and half a dozen men began sealing the gates. He walked like the ground belonged to him. Lina followed, holding the tablet to her chest. Her arms ached, her head rang from the night's chaos, but she didn't want to look weak. Not in front of him. He stopped at the far table, poured 2 glasses of water, and slid one toward her. "Drink," he said. She took it without argument. Her fingers trembled only once. "Marchesi will regroup," Matteo continued. "They'll come again. I need that system rebuilt before they do." "You mean the machine that decides who lives or dies," she said. He looked at her, steady, unreadable. "That's what this city already is. I just run it more efficiently." She almost laughed. "You make murder sound like maintenance." He stepped closer. "And you make survival sound like luck. Which one do you prefer?" She met his eyes. "Neither." Something flickered there. Approval, maybe. He liked her spine. Matteo turned to the table, tracing a finger along the map projected across its surface. "You'll work here. You'll eat when I tell you. You'll sleep when I tell you. No one touches you. No one speaks to you without my say." "That sounds like captivity." "It's protection." He looked up again, voice calm but edged with warning. "There's a difference." Lina crossed her arms. "And if I refuse?" He stepped close enough for her to feel the heat of him, but his tone stayed level. "Then you walk out that door and die before sunset." For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then she said quietly, "You really don't know how to be kind, do you?" He leaned down just enough that she caught the faint scent of gunpowder and soap. "Kindness gets people killed in my world. But you?" His gaze flicked over her face, sharp and lingering. "You make me forget that sometimes." Her pulse skipped. She didn't know if it was fear or something worse. He straightened again, the moment snapping like a wire pulled too tight. "Get some rest," he said. "Work starts in 2 hours." Matteo. He watched her walk away, head high, steps quick, still defiant. No one had ever talked back to him like that, and walked away breathing. He poured himself another drink, staring at the amber swirl. It was strange how quiet the warehouse felt now that she was out of sight. When his second-in-command approached, Matteo spoke without looking up. "Double the guards around her room. Anyone even looks wrong at her, I'll handle it myself." The man hesitated. Understood, boss. After he left, Matteo took out his gun, checked the chamber, and placed it on the table beside the glass. He'd built his empire on control, on fear, precision, and distance. But that control felt thinner every hour she was near. He finished his drink and looked toward the hallway where she'd disappeared. She's not yours, he muttered to himself. Then, quieter. Not yet. Chapter 5. Terms of Loyalty. Lina Rain whispered against the tall windows of the warehouse, a slow rhythm that seemed to match her pulse. The lights were low, only the monitor threw pale blue across the metal walls. Matteo stood behind her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him before he said a word. You missed a line, he murmured. She didn't look up. No, I didn't. He stepped nearer until his reflection appeared beside hers on the screen. Then why are you holding your breath? Lina turned. The question hit harder than it should have. He was near, too near, and the space between them felt charged, as if the air itself had thinned. His eyes drifted over her face, pausing on the corner of her mouth, where she'd bitten her lip in concentration. He reached out, almost idly, and brushed his thumb along her jaw. You'll draw blood doing that. Her breath caught. I'm fine. I didn't say you weren't. His hand fell away, but the warmth stayed. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, thunder rolled through the city. You don't trust me, she said quietly. I trust what you can do. That's not the same. He tilted his head, studying her. Trust is earned. You're earning it. She wanted to ask what that meant, to him, to them, but he had already moved past her to the console, his shoulder brushing hers as he leaned in. The contact was nothing, yet it felt like everything. When the system beeped, she jumped. He didn't. They're tracing the route, she said. I know. He stayed beside her, his hand steady on the table near hers. The tips of his fingers grazed her wrist as he pointed to a line of code. Shift it here. Her pulse stumbled. You could have just told me. I could have, he agreed. But then I wouldn't have your attention. She looked up, meeting his eyes. For a heartbeat, neither of them pretended to be anything other than what they were. Two people who wanted what they shouldn't. Matteo. He stepped closer again. What? Nothing, she whispered. He gave a low sound that might have been a laugh. That's the first honest thing you've said tonight. Then he moved past her, the moment breaking like glass underfoot. Finish the upload. We don't have much time. Matteo. He told himself to walk away, but he lingered. Her scent, faint soap and ozone from the rain, clung to the air. She worked fast, fingers steady now, pretending the world hadn't just narrowed to the space between them. She was his weakness. He knew it the way he knew the weight of a gun or the pull of gravity. Still, he stayed close enough to feel the edge of her presence. When the final light turned green, she exhaled. He reached forward and, without thinking, pushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Good, he said. She looked up. You could say thank you. I just did. Her lips curved, almost a smile, almost defiance. You're impossible. And you're still here. For a moment, he thought she might step back. Instead, she held his gaze. The storm outside cracked, lighting her eyes in blue. He wanted to tell her to leave, to keep herself clear of him and his world. Instead, he said softly, Stay out of sight until I call for you. You'll need me again? He hesitated, then nodded once. More than I should. Lina. The power flickered once, twice, then died. Only the storm remained, the flashes of lightning slicing through the dark. The hum of the city vanished, leaving a silence that pressed against her chest. She turned to Matteo. He was already moving, swift, controlled, one hand reaching for his gun, the other motioning her to stay behind him. "Backup generator," she whispered. "Cut. Someone's inside." The words were calm, but his stance told a different story. He was a live wire, energy coiled and ready. She could feel it radiating off him. His control, his focus, his fury. A thud echoed down the corridor. He turned to her, his face half lit by lightning. "You move when I move. Understand?" Lina nodded, heart hammering. They waited. Seconds stretched into minutes. Her nerves burned, but his presence steadied her. Even in the dark, he was the only thing that made sense. Then the door burst open. Gunfire cracked through the room. Matteo pulled her down behind a steel crate, his arm wrapping around her, pressing her close to the floor. She could feel his heartbeat, steady, brutal, alive. "Stay low," he ordered. "What are you?" But before she could finish, he was up, firing back into the shadows. Sparks flashed. The smell of metal and rain filled the air. When it was over, the silence felt deafening. He lowered his weapon, scanning the bodies. "2 scouts," he said. "They weren't after the data. They were after you." "Me?" she asked, voice shaking. He turned to her, expression unreadable. Then he crouched, one hand braced beside her on the floor, the other lifting her chin until she met his gaze. "I told you," he said quietly. "Once you walked into my world, you became a target." She wanted to be angry, to throw it back at him, but all she could see was the look in his eyes. Cold, controlled, but there was something else beneath it, something that scared her more than the guns. "Then why keep me here?" she asked. "Because," he said, voice low, "I don't want anyone else touching what's mine." Her breath caught. The words were a warning and a confession. He saw the way she looked at him, the confusion and the heat all tangled together. His hand was still under her chin, thumb brushing once against her pulse. It wasn't soft, but it wasn't cruel either. It was a reminder of his claim, of his protection, of everything he couldn't say out loud. Lina swallowed. "You can't keep me like a secret." He leaned in, his voice close enough to make her shiver. "Then stop being one." For a moment, neither of them moved. Lightning flashed again, throwing their faces into sharp relief, hers uncertain, his carved from stone. Then he stood, pulling her up with him. "We're leaving," he said. "They'll send more." "Where?" "Somewhere I can see you," he said simply. "And where they can't." Matteo. He told himself it was logic. Keep her close, keep her safe. But logic didn't explain why his hand still burned from touching her, or why her voice still echoed in his head. He had lived too long in shadows to believe in softness. Yet here she was, walking beside him, barefoot, hair damp from the rain, eyes steady despite the fear. Every instinct in him said she'd destroy him. Every instinct also said he'd let her. He opened the car door for her without a word. When she slid in, her fingers brushed his sleeve, just enough to make his composure fracture for a heartbeat. He shut the door, exhaled, and told himself it meant nothing. It did. Chapter 6. Safe house. Silence. Lina. The drive had been wordless. Now the silence filled the narrow safe house like smoke. Rain still clung to her clothes and hair, dripping onto the worn wooden floor. She stood by the small window, watching the storm fade into a faint mist over the city roofs. Behind her, Matteo locked the door, checked the windows, then the door again. Routine, efficient, until his gaze caught hers in the reflection. "You're shaking," he said. "I'm fine." "You keep saying that." He walked over, boots soundless on the wood. "You never are." She turned, crossing her arms. "And what about you? You look like you haven't slept in a week." He shrugged out of his coat and set his gun on the table. "I don't sleep when there's work left." "That's not work." She nodded toward the weapon. "That's obsession." He stopped in front of her. "You think I can afford to be anything else?" She wanted to argue, to tell him that living like this would destroy him, but the distance between them vanished before she could form the words. He was close again, too close, his shadow falling over her. "Why do you keep looking at me like that?" she asked quietly. He studied her face, eyes steady, voice low. "Because you make it hard not to." Her pulse stumbled. "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got." For a second she thought he'd step back. Instead, he reached up and tucked a strand of wet hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered, tracing the edge of her jaw, light, precise, almost careful. She didn't move, couldn't. "You should rest," he said finally. "I can't. My head won't stop spinning." He nodded once, as if he understood. "Then sit." She did, sinking into the couch. Matteo poured 2 glasses of water from a half-empty bottle, handed her one, and sat across from her. The silence returned, but it was different now, softer, full of unsaid things. After a long while, she said, "You don't have to protect me every second." He looked up from his glass. "That's not how it works." "Then how does it?" He held her gaze, the corners of his mouth barely lifting. "When I decide someone is mine to protect, it doesn't stop until I do." She exhaled. "That sounds like a prison." "For you," he said. "Or for me." She didn't answer. She couldn't. The storm outside had quieted, leaving only the hum of the city and the sound of 2 people too close to be strangers, too stubborn to admit what that meant. Matteo. He watched her fight sleep, eyelids heavy, jaw tight with stubbornness. The same defiance that made her impossible to control was the thing that kept him anchored. When she finally dozed off, curled against the couch arm, he stood. He wanted to look away, to remind himself that softness had no place in his world. But his hand moved before his thoughts caught up. He pulled the blanket from the chair and draped it over her shoulders. She stirred slightly, murmuring something he couldn't catch. Matteo hesitated, then brushed his fingers through the damp strands of her hair, once, quickly. The small gesture felt dangerous, far more than the gunfire earlier that night. "Sleep," he whispered, mostly to himself. Because he knew the moment she woke, the world outside would start hunting again, and he would be the one standing between her and it. Lina Dawn crept through the cracks in the blinds, pale and thin, dust floating in the light. The safe house was quiet, too quiet. Matteo stood by the table, his jacket off, sleeves rolled up, the scars on his forearms catching the faint glow. He looked like a man built from tension, every muscle a line drawn too tight. Lina sat on the couch, watching him. She wasn't sad anymore. Not the way she thought she'd be. She understood him now. Everything about Matteo, the precision, the silence, the sharp control. It was how he survived, how he kept surviving. He didn't know how to be gentle, not really. Gentleness was the kind of thing that got people like him killed. Still, understanding him didn't make being near him easy. It made it harder. Because now she could see the cracks, the way his jaw clenched when she said his name, the way his eyes followed her like he was fighting himself. She finally said, "You could have let me go." He didn't look at her. "I could have." "But you didn't." "No." "Then tell me why." He exhaled slowly, still not turning. "Because you're useful." Lina's lips curved in a humorless smile. "You don't keep people like me just because we're useful." He said nothing. "So what is it then?" she pressed, voice low, measured. "Are you keeping me here for the machine, or because I don't fear you?" That made him turn. The room changed with the movement. The air thickened. The distance between them disappeared. His stare hit her like a pulse, cold and fierce all at once. "Be careful with your words," he said. His tone wasn't loud, but it carried weight. "You don't understand the kind of man you're talking to." "I do," she said. "I think that's what scares you." He took a step toward her. 1, 2. Every inch he moved tightened something inside her chest. "Lina. Matteo. Don't play a game you can't win." His voice dropped, rougher now, the edge of his composure starting to fray. "If I lose control, if you push too far—" He stopped himself, eyes darkening. "You won't walk away from it, not because I'd stop you, but because you wouldn't want to." Her breath caught, but she didn't look away. "Then maybe you shouldn't stand so close." He almost smiled, but it wasn't amusement. It was pain. "You see? That's the problem. You think I can choose that." Lina's voice softened. "And I think you already did." Silence stretched between them, alive and sharp. His shoulders rose with every slow breath, his restraint visible in the way his hands curled at his sides, not to reach for her, but to keep himself in check. For the first time, she saw what it cost him to stay in control, and somehow that hurt more than all the danger surrounding them. Finally, he turned away, his voice quieter now. "Get ready. We move in 10. "Where?" "Somewhere I can't see you," he said. Then, after a pause, "Before I forget why I shouldn't. Matteo." He could still feel the echo of her words in the room, like heat that wouldn't fade. She saw too much, too far. He'd built walls to keep everyone out, and she'd walked through them like they were nothing. He told himself she'd only last a few days in his world. Now he wasn't sure he could last a day without her in it, and that, more than anything, terrified him. Chapter 7. The Quiet Between Lina. She sat in the passenger seat, arms crossed, pretending to look out the window. The truth was, she couldn't stop looking at him. The way his jaw worked, tight and unreadable. The way his shirt clung to his chest from the damp of his earlier temper. She hated that she wanted to touch him again. Hated that even when he was furious, he made her feel safe. Finally, she said, "You're angry." "No," he said flatly. "Liar." That made him glance at her, just a quick flick of his eyes, but it was sharp, dangerous, and too intimate. "Do you ever stop talking? Do you ever stop hiding?" He exhaled slowly, knuckles flexing against the steering wheel. "Careful, little girl." She smiled faintly. "You already warned me about playing games I can't win." "I wasn't joking." "I know." Her tone softened, but her eyes didn't drop. "You just don't like that I'm not afraid of you." His lips twitched. "You think that's a good thing?" "I think it's why you can't stay away." The car slowed, pulling to the side of the road. Gravel crunched under the tires. He didn't say a word as he shifted the gear into park. The tension that had been stretching between them for days snapped like wire. Matteo turned to her slowly, leaning back in his seat. "You like testing limits," he said. "I like understanding them." His voice lowered. And what if I tell you you're the limit? Then maybe, she said, breath catching, you should stop pretending you don't care. He moved then, not sudden, but inevitable, leaning across the space between them until his breath brushed her cheek. He didn't touch her, not yet. His hand hovered near her jaw, his voice a rasp against her skin. You think I don't care? He murmured. You have no idea what I've been holding back. Her pulse jumped. Then stop. That broke his control when he leaned in when his lips touched hers. She was on fire. It wasn't like kissing. It was like testing himself. Testing if he can take or she should stay away. Then kiss deepened not by him but by her. The corner of his mouth curved, dark and low. Now that he kissed her, now that he knows she was just as hungry as him. He brushed his fingers along her chin, his thumb ghosting near her lips, and land on her neck, grabbing it not to heart but to own. The air around them burned with silence and tension. Then he drew back, slow, deliberate. You don't know what you're asking for, he said. Maybe I do. His gaze dropped to her mouth one last time. Then he started the car again. The engine roared back to life, the sound swallowing everything they didn't say. She turned to the window, but she could still feel him beside her, his control, his hunger, and the truth sitting heavy between them. The truth that scared them both. Matteo. He didn't look at her for the rest of the drive. He couldn't. If he did, he wasn't sure he'd stop. Her voice, her defiance, the way she looked at him, the test of her hips and her hunger was everything Crave, as if it burned straight through the silence he'd built his life on. He wasn't angry at her anymore. He was angry at himself. For wanting her, for needing the one thing that made him human again. And he knew it was already too late. Chapter 8. Under the same roof. Lina. The safe house was old but clean. One of those places that looked like it hadn't been lived in for years, but everything still worked perfectly. A single bulb flickered above the doorway as Matteo pushed it open, stepping aside for her to enter first. The air inside was cold, heavy with dust and distance. Still, it felt safer than the car ride had. When he finally looked at her, his voice was low. You can take the room on the right. You'll stay out here? She asked. He nodded once. I'll keep watch. Matteo, she said quietly. He stopped in the doorway. What? You can't keep living like this. He didn't turn. Like what? Half alive, she said. Half here, half somewhere else. You're not made of stone, even if you wish you were. He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, almost to himself, maybe stone is safer. That hurt more than it should have. She stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. You don't need to protect me from who you are. He finally looked at her, really looked. Something unreadable flickered in his eyes, like the first crack in a wall that had been standing too long. I don't need your understanding, he said. I need your silence. Then you'll get neither, she replied. For a heartbeat they stood there, him in the doorway, her barely a step away. The air between them felt alive, too sharp, too close. Then something shifted. His hand came up, brushing a strand of her hair away from her face, gentle, unexpected. His touch lingered for a second too long, and when she met his gaze, he didn't look away. You make everything complicated, he muttered. Maybe that's what you need. He almost smiled. Almost. You should sleep. Then come to sleep with me, she said. He stepped back, turning toward the window, pretending to look outside, but she saw the way his shoulders tensed, the way his jaw locked as if holding back something he didn't want to feel. That is when she left him to be. Lina. The smell of coffee filled the safe house, strong, bitter, and unexpected. She found Matteo already awake, sitting at the small wooden table by the window. He wasn't wearing his jacket, only the white shirt rolled up to his forearms, faint scars running along his skin like faded maps. The gun lay beside his mug, casual as a spoon. He looked like a man who hadn't slept, but didn't need to. "Morning," she said carefully. He didn't look up. "You're up early?" "I didn't sleep." "I know." She smiled faintly. "You always know." He finally glanced at her. "That's my job." She followed him. "You can't stay in a war forever, Matteo." He turned, meeting her gaze head-on. "War is all I know." "Then learn something else." He stared at her, and for a moment the world stopped. The light caught his face, softening the edges of the man she thought she knew. And there it was again, the smallest fracture in the armor he wore like a second skin. He stepped closer. She didn't move back. He exhaled, slow and rough. "You shouldn't be here." "I know." And yet, she finished for him. "You haven't told me to leave." The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Then he turned, grabbed his jacket, and said, "We have to move." The shift was instant. From raw to cold, from almost vulnerable to commander again. The rain came hard, slicing across the windshield in long silver streaks. The car swerved off the main road, tires skidding across the mud before Matteo brought it under control. And she'd seen it last night. That crack in his voice. That moment where the mask slipped, and the man underneath bled through. The car finally stopped beneath an old bridge. Matteo killed the engine, listening. Only the sound of rain filled the silence now. He got out first, scanning the shadows. Then he motioned for her to follow. "We stay here until the storm dies." "Are you the king? Where are your soldiers? Why you are alone?" she asked, smiling. "They are trying to eliminate those who wants you dead, and I won't allow anyone near you except me." Matteo shrugged off his jacket and tossed it to her. "You'll freeze," she said. "I've had worse." She wanted to argue, but his tone made it pointless. Instead, she pulled the jacket around herself. It was heavy, warm, and smelled faintly of him. She hated how comforting that was. He leaned against the side of the car, head tilted up toward the rain. She stood beside him, both silent. She didn't move when he stepped closer, didn't flinch when his hand brushed the edge of her sleeve, his fingers cold against her skin. The storm raged around them, but the quiet between their breaths was louder. "You're not supposed to look at me like that," he murmured. "Like what?" "Like you don't see the blood on my hands." She swallowed hard. "Maybe I just see the man holding it together." His eyes lingered on her face. Her lips, her breath, the defiance that made him want to pull her closer to test her again, to make her his, and protect her from everything, including himself. But he didn't. She wanted to tell him that she didn't need his protection, that she wanted his honesty more. But as she watched him standing there, silent, drenched, eyes scanning the shadows, she realized something. He didn't protect people because he wanted to control them. He did it because it was the only way he knew how to love. Chapter 9. The Choice. Lina. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the world still smelled like smoke and storm. They stood by the bridge, the headlights of Matteo's car cutting through the fog. His phone rang, sharp and sudden. He answered, voice steady. "Speak." There was a pause, then only the clipped sound of his replies. Dead? Good. Burn the rest. He hung up, slid the phone into his pocket, and stared at the dark horizon. It's done, he said quietly. The mole's gone. The threat's gone. For now, you're safe. She exhaled, long and shaky. So it's over. He nodded once, then turned toward her fully. It's over. But you have a choice now. Her brows drew together. A choice? You can walk away, Matteo said. His voice was low, controlled, the kind of tone that didn't invite argument. You're free. No one's watching you anymore. No one can give you orders, not the ones you don't know, not the ones who tried to use you. If I let you go now, you stay gone. You live your life. Build whatever you want. And if anyone touches you, I'll still make sure they disappear. She swallowed hard. And the other choice? He stepped closer, his presence sharp and heavy in the air. You can come with me. Her breath hitched. But understand what that means. His eyes darkened. There's no leaving once you enter my home. No running, no regretting. You'll live under my protection, my name, my rules. I'll give you freedom, as much as I can. You'll build what you love, work how you please. But you'll do it in my world, with me. He let the words hang, raw and absolute. Think before you answer, Lina, because when I open that door, there's no walking back out. She held his gaze, searching for something, hesitation, warmth, anything that wasn't that relentless certainty. But all she found was truth. You'll give me protection, she said quietly. A home. I'll give you everything I can, he said. Her voice hardened. And what about you? His brows furrowed. What? Do I get you? She asked. Or do I only get your guards, your walls, and your shadow? Matteo's jaw flexed, but he said nothing. She took a step closer, just enough to touch the edge of his chest. If all you're offering me is safety, then I can buy a gun and protect myself. I don't need your empire for that. He didn't move, didn't blink. I want you, she whispered. All of you. The man, not the king. If you can't give me that, then let me go. Don't take me just to torture me with what you'll never give. The silence between them was fire. Then he moved, slow, deliberate, his hand rising to her throat, fingers curling under her jaw. He didn't squeeze. He didn't hurt her. He just held her still. His voice came out low and rough, the kind of sound that could break steel. You have no idea what you're asking for. Yes, I do. Her pulse fluttered under his thumb, but her eyes didn't drop. I'm asking you to stop pretending you don't want this. Something cracked in his gaze. That cold, lethal stillness fractured by something rawer. Then he said, Get in the car. She blinked. Where are we going? He leaned closer, his breath brushing her lips. Home. At his home. The drive was silent, the kind of silence that carried 1,000 unspoken words. When they reached his estate, black marble walls glinting under the night, Lina realized this wasn't a house. It was his kingdom. Matteo led her through the long hallways, the gods nodding in silent acknowledgement. Every step echoed like a promise she could no longer take back. They stopped at a heavy door at the end of a corridor. He opened it. A workshop. Hers now. Polished steel, half-assembled weapons, wires, light flickering across machines. He turned to her. "This is yours." She stared, speechless. "Mine?" "I told you," he said. "I'll give you what I can. You do what you love. You stay safe. And you stay here." She met his eyes again. "And you?" He stepped closer, the last of the distance vanishing between them. His hand brushed her face. Rough, careful, certain. "I'll be right here," he said. "Near enough to touch you and feel you." When he leaned in to kiss her, she melt to him the way he touched the way he wanted her. His hunger, all of it had to make her fear, but in state make her hot and fill with desire. She didn't let go when he pulled back. She didn't stop. "Be mine. Please stop resisting me if you really want me." That is when whole world would burn, and Matteo wouldn't care when he carried her to his room the way she clinged to his shirt like her life was depend on it. The way he took her, worship her body and punish her for breaking his wall with her innocent, and making her his body and soul was all she ever wanted. The next morning when she woke up, she was alone. Not that she expected him to wait for her, but she feel alone and strange there without him. So she decided to go to workshop until he is back. Hours passed before she realized how deep she'd fallen into her work. The hum of tools, the click of circuits, the metallic rhythm of creation. It calmed her in a way nothing else could. But she wasn't alone. She felt him before she saw him. Matteo leaned against the doorway, silent, watching. He didn't interrupt, didn't speak. Just observed the way she moved, the way her hands handled each tool like an extension of thought. Finally, she broke the silence. "Are you here to supervise or to stare?" "Both," he said simply. When he stopped beside her, she felt the air shift. Thick, charged, too close. His presence filled every inch of space between them. They stood like that, face to face, silence drawn tight between them. Then she took a step closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "You said I'd be safe here." "You are." "Then stop watching me like I'm going to break." He exhaled, his jaw tensing. "You think I can stop?" "Try." He looked down at her, eyes burning sharp with hunger and desire. His hand lifted, almost without thought, and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, his knuckles grazing her skin. "I want you now, here where you exactly are most venerable and innocent." He whispered more to himself than her, "Then take here now the way you want." When he took her lips between his, it wasn't a kiss. It was a warning, and a promise.